Hello and welcome to the beautiful skies over Austria, where I'm flying right now. Took off from Vienna and I'm en route to Innsbruck, where we will make the runway 8 approach. And I will make a video of the approach and how to set up the approach in the airplane. What we're going to do is we fly to the Rettenberg NDB, or Romeo Tango Tango. That's just off the map to the right. We then fly along the localizer at course 255 towards Oscar Echo Victor. And at this point we make a left turn heading 230 until we visually can see that we are close to the mountain range here. Make then the right turn heading 264, and at this point we make the right hand turn to final runway 8 to Innsbruck. We will be at Rettenberg NDB at 9,500 feet, and we will descend along this line to 3,700. And this is the minimum altitude that we got to have on this stretch before we make the turn to final. You don't want to be higher, because then you come out of the turn too high and, well, basically you miss your approach. And you don't want to be lower, because then you are, well, too close to the ground for comfort. Well, as you can see, we will use two localizer DMEs. So the first thing that we do is we dial in the frequencies of these two VORs into the navigation radios. This is the localizer. I dial this one into the left, and this I'll dial into the right, because it's a good reference point. I will explain that in a minute. First we dial in the frequency, so that's 111.1 in the left nav radio and 109.7 in the right navigation radio. So 111.1 and 109.7. Now both VORs are equipped with DME. DME stands for distance measuring equipment. That means that when we are in range of the beacons, we can see in these two windows how far from the beacons we are. Left one for the left nav radio and the DME2 for the right nav radio. Now, as you can see, there are 2 points where we have to make turns that are critical points actually, and that's this one and this one. And these points have no name, so I can't go to the legs page, type in a name and have that point in the nav display. So I have to come up with something else to make them visible on the nav display, because that's what I want. I want to be able to look at the nav display, see where I am, and know that at that point I have to make a certain turn or do a certain action. And therefore we are going to set up some fixes, and a fix is being set up in the flight management computer. You press the fix button on the CDU, and then you get this screen: fix info, fix name, radial and distance. Now normally you can just enter the name of a VOR, so for example the Oscar Echo Victor or Oscar Echo Juliet, and that will identify it here, and then you can just type in the radial and the distance that you want for that VOR. However, both the Oscar Echo Juliet and the Oscar Echo Victor are not in the IXEG 737 nav database, not as fixes anyway. So we have to come up with something else. Now these points, they have no name, but they are defined by the distance relative to either Oscar Echo Victor or Oscar Echo Juliet. At D 4.2 OEV means distance 4.2 nautical miles from Oscar Echo Victor, or distance 6.5 nautical miles from Oscar Echo Juliet. And between, and so this point is at 14.1 miles from Oscar Echo Juliet, or 3.5 from Oscar Echo Victor. Now I can't identify these two VORs in the flight management computer, so I came up with a workaround. Between the beacon and the points there's another NDB beacon for Epsam or Alpha Bravo at 313, which is this one. And it is given at what distance from either Oscar Echo Juliet or Oscar Echo Victor Epsam is located, so we can work with that one. Because if we take Oscar Echo Juliet as a starting point, Epsam is at 4.4 miles from Oscar Echo Juliet. Well, the point where I have to make the turn to the left heading 230 is at 6.5 miles from Oscar Echo Juliet. And thus we can conclude that it is at 6.5 minus 4.4 equals 2.1 nautical miles from Epsam. So we're going to dial that in as a fix. Epsam, Alpha Bravo, get a list of NDBs, it's 313, so we select the top one. And now you can enter a radial and a distance. Now I don't know the radial that I have, so I don't make an input for radial, but I do a slash immediately. And distance is 2.1 nautical miles. Now if you have a fix and you know a radial, let's say it's at 175 5 miles, you can just dial in 175 /5 miles, for example. Since I don't know the radial, I don't make any inputs for the radial. I just immediately press the / and the distance to the beacon. So that's the first one that's now set. And I want a second, which is also from Epsam, but 14.1 minus 4.4 equals 9.7 miles from Epsam. So again, Alpha Bravo, 313 / 9.7. Now, this will show as a green circle on the nav display, and I can show that to you. I will decrease the zoom, go to plan mode. And if you go to the legs page, when you are in plan mode, the nav display will focus around a waypoint and not around the airplane. And you can step through your waypoints using this key. So if I now step towards Alpha Bravo, there's a green dotted circle around that beacon, and that green circle, that's the 2.1 nautical miles from Epsam. And if I step further, I can see that there's another green circle around Epsam, and that's the 9.7. So now when I'm flying and I see on the nav display that the plane hits the green line, I know, hey, now I have to make the left turn heading 230, and when I'm hitting this line, I know now I have to make the large turn to final. So that's basically the idea of fix. You can highlight certain points on the route where you have to take certain actions. Now because on the map the distance are given from the beacons and I have now made them relative to Epsam, I can't just go blind on the fix that I put in. But as soon as the plane hits the fix, I have to cross-check whether at the green line I am at 6.5 Oscar Echo Juliet or 14.1 Oscar Echo Juliet or 3.5 Oscar Echo Victor. But you will see that when we get there. So for now that's the fix. We have set the navigation radios. Now we also saw that we have a localizer on course of 255, so that has to be dialed into the left course window, 255. It is now set. So that's okay now. So we already set the 255 for the course. I also know that I have to be at Rettenberg NDB at 9,500, and then I have to descend to 3,700 feet, and basically I want to be at 3,007 feet at or shortly after this point. And I will have to reduce the speed prior to the descent from 9,500. And the reason why I have to do that is that the lag from Rettenberg NDB to our point where we have to make our first turn is relatively short. And you have to lose a lot of altitude from 9,500 all the way down to 3,700 in that stretch. And that does not give you enough distance to lose both altitude and speed. So I will have to lose the speed prior to descending on this leg. And therefore I want to be at speed of 180 knots before I start the descent. So now we get back into the flight management computer in the legs page, and we'll verify some things. Since I couldn't set the exact waypoints in the flight management computer, I made another entry to, well, give us a rough guide, which is the Epsom beacon and the Innsbrück NDB. So Epsom and in. And I said, well, basically around Epsom I want to be at 3,700. And at in, well, we still have to be at 3,700. So let's dial that in. 160 for the speed. And execute. Now the reason why I want to be at 160 on this stretch is I want to set the plane up for landing on this leg. Before I make the turn to final, I want to have gear down, flap set and the approach speed set. So basically I can run the landing checklist on this stretch. So I can fully focus on the turn and I don't have to be distracted by selecting gear down, setting flaps, reducing speed, etc. You have very limited time because it's all very short distance. So you better come prepared. It's not a dangerous approach, it's a challenging approach, and you really have to look ahead and start thinking ahead and keep your mind to it. And that's the fun thing about it. It's the most fun approach in Europe, I think. At least to fly it. We cannot use the flight management system, so once we are descending we will switch to the mode control panel and set that and use the navigation radios. So basically that's what we can do in the FMS. Of course we need to set the approach speed. I want to be flaps 40 landing today with 127 knots and a 5 knot wind component, making the approach speed 132 knots. And I want to be as slow as possible because the runway in Innsbruck isn't very long, so we can't come in too fast or we don't have enough runway length to come to a complete stop. Now we are approaching the top of descent, so I will reduce speed for 270 knots now, 270 knots being our descent speed. So now we see the speed starting to decrease. I can already set the auto brakes to 3. Or well, I set them to max. Innsbruck has a short runway, so once we hit the ground we want to be slowing down as quickly as we can. And there's another thing about the runway in Innsbruck. The first part until touchdown point is slightly higher than the rest of the runway. It moves in a hill, so if you overfly the aiming area on the runway, it's quite difficult to get a decent touchdown. You often land late, therefore you have to be on your toes and always ready to make a go around. I tried to make this video yesterday and well, it didn't really work out. I came up with a pretty nice landing in the end, but there were lots of mistakes, so I decided to reshoot it today and see if we get any better. Now since we are approaching the top of descent now, the flight management computer is telling us to reset the MCP alt, so I will set that to 9,500 feet, being the altitude we have to be at Rettenberg. So let's check whether that is set. Rettenberg 9,500. Basically I want to be at 9,500, not above. I want to be at it. So that's now set. We are approaching top of descent. I will switch the level change anyway right now. Sooner we're at 9,500 the better. We need a bit of space for ourselves to slow down once we are on 9,500. I don't know if you know the area around Innsbruck, but it's quite a challenging terrain. Let's see. This is Austria, Innsbruck is here. Now as you can see, it's in a valley. I will switch the terrain on. And if we take the aerial photography, this is the airport. We're coming in from the east, from Rattenberg, fly through this valley. Then somewhere after Upsam, the town, we make the left turn heading towards Innsbruck, LGLS. And then we make the right turn flying very close to this mountain ridge. I will set it to 3D. And flick the image so that we now can see it. Now as you can see, the airport is here. Here we have steep terrain moving up, and then we have another steep terrain moving up. We have sort of well, flat land, and then the Alps starts. And we have to fly over this area close to this ridge, and then after passing Axams, the town, we make a right turn. It says so on the map. It says visual cue, Church of Axams for start of right base. So when you are flying this approach visual, there's a church in Axams. It's down here. And when you are there, that's the point where you start your 180-degree turn to final runway 8. So that's what we will do. Anyway, we are descending now, approaching 20,000 feet. Of course, I will switch the frequency to the ATIS frequency for Innsbruck to see if we can already pick that up. We definitely need the correct QNH to set our altimeters correctly, otherwise we are bound for a catastrophe anyway. So I'll leave that on, and well, the radio, it will come online as soon as we are in range. And if I'm talking, I will stop talking, listen to it, and then set the QNH immediately, so I cannot forget that. No, it's not completely realistic, but well, normally you have two guys to do everything, think about everything and check everything, and I have to do it all by myself. But that's the fun of flight simulation. By the way, the scenery that you're looking at is HD Mesh V3 combined with the photo tiles from zonephoto.x-plane.fr. Now I don't have the entire area of Western Europe in photoreal terrain, but there are some areas that I love to fly, and I downloaded the tiles for that. One of these areas is the Alps, so both the Austrian and Swiss Alps I have in the photo tiles combined with the HD Mesh V3, and I think it gives quite a nice result. The weather that you are looking at is SkyMax Pro V4. It's working quite well, and I will switch on the NDIs, by the way, because we have clouds and we have a temperature of below 0 Celsius, so that's freezing. The SkyMax Pro V4, well, it looks nice. It does have quite a significant frame rate impact. I can show you my settings. As you can see, the cloud area covered is set low to just below 5,000 square kilometers. If I set it higher, the frame rates start to decrease drastically, and I always aim to have about 25-30 frames per second to give a smooth sim experience. And if I set the SkyMax Pro V4 cloud coverage to full, I get about, well, 16 to 19, that's 16 to 19 frames per second, which is, well, I think it's too low. So we are now coming up. This is the Rattenberg NDB.
Crane information Romeo. 1200 Zulu weather. Wind calm. Visibility 10. Sky conditions 10,000 few, 30,000 broken. Temperature 0. Dew point -3. Altimeter 3044. Arriving and departing runways
so
08 left. Advise on initial contact. You have Romeo.
Set it immediately 3044. Of course, we set it on all three of our instruments. 3044.
Innsbruck Crane information Romeo. 1200 Zulu weather. Wind calm. Visibility 10. Sky conditions 10,000 few, 30,000 broken. Temperature 0. Dew point -3. altimeter 3044.
So it's quite a nice day. It's freezingly cold, but it's a clear day. We have a good visibility, so that's calm winds. So that's basically the perfect conditions for the runway 8 approach. Well, just look at these mountains. I think it looks gorgeous. I love it. So anyway, we are now passing 13,500 feet, well, almost. And you can see on the nav display that because I set up the very rough route into Innsbruck, making a direct leg to Epsom, and that was not according to the map. So when we are approaching Rettenberg, I will switch from the LNAV to heading mode, and we'll keep flying on this heading to intercept the localizer. The first VOR is now identified, so we are from Oscar Echo Juliet, we are now 30 miles away, well, just below that. And I think it's time now to make the cabin ready, so seatbelts on and cabin crew prepare for landing. And inform the cabin crew, of course, so that's what we just did. Now we're coming down to 9,500 before the Rettenberg NDB, which is good, because we are at 250 knots and we have to reduce speed to 180 knots prior to intercepting the localizer. So in this approach you better be slightly ahead of everything and give yourself time to lose speed and lose altitude. Rather than waiting too long, because if you are too high and or too fast, you can't make the approach successful. So we are now approaching 10,000 feet, so let's reduce speed to 250 knots and flick on the landing lights. So speed is now being reduced. That's okay, let's... There we are. So temperature is still below zero. We do have some a lot of moisture in the air. Basically, it's kind of blocking the view, so we leave the anti-ice on for now. Oh. So basically we can already run the approach checklist now. Prepare for landing was announced, fasten seatbelt signs are on, exterior lights are set, landing data is checked, recall is also checked, crew briefing is completed, auto brakes. Max is set, altimeters 3044 is set and cross-checked, and that's the approach checklist completed. So here we are now, 250 knots, 9,500 at Rettenberg. I will now switch to the heading select to intercept the VOR localizer. So we select that one as well and we'll reduce speed to 180 knots. And to monitor the interception of the localizer, I will now set this display from map to VOR. Of course, the speed is now being reduced to 180 knots, and we will make sure we have flaps 5 at 180 knots. So once we are below 200 feet, I will start lowering the flaps. Now, the tricky thing is that This is basically a valley, but on the end of the valley there's a mountain ridge, and that's this one. So we can descend earlier, because then we would fly into the mountain, and of course that's not what the airplane really likes, flying into rock. So let's set flaps 1. Flaps 2. And set flaps 5. Now another thing about this turn, we are well, quite close to the ground when we are at this point. So once you are down there, you really have a tendency not to make the turn too steep, but you really have to do that, and you also have to lose a lot of altitude. You are 3,700 in here. The runway is at 1,900 feet, that's 19. So you have to, you don't want to be higher than 3,000 feet when you come out. So you do have to lose at least 700 feet and preferably a little bit more in this turn. Otherwise you will be too high on the approach and you don't have enough time to compensate for that. And there we have the localizers now being intercepted. So there we are, turning onto the localizer. We can set the heading to 255 as well now. And we are now over the mountain range, so we will now descend 3,700. Left change. Descending into the valley. And because I'm now established on the localizer, I can switch it back to the map. And that will give me a clear view on the fixes that we set along the route. Let me reduce the distance on this one. As you can see, this is the this is the outer circle of the second fix that we set, so we don't have to do anything at here. We also don't have to do anything at here because that's this part, but when we reach the second green line here, then we have to make the turn to heading 230. Now the plane is now following the localizer, so it won't make any turns out of itself. It will just fly straight to the runway area. So I can already select heading, or set the heading for 230, so that when we reach the fix, all that I have to do is just press heading select, and we don't have to switch and turn all sorts of knobs. That can only be, it only costs time. So if you do that now, it's just a matter of pressing the right button at the right time. And that's what we want basically. I will add some drag to speed up the descent. So this all looks nice and stable, and we are now really descending into the valley. If you are on top of one of these mountains, you can basically look on top of the airplane. It really is a beautiful area. It's high on my bucket list to go there someday myself. Now this is the river Inn. Innsbrück means bridge over the Inn. So we are now just monitoring our descent, going nice and stable. Add a little bit of extra drag. We still have 2,300 feet to lose. Don't really like the visibility. That is not too good. But we are nice on the glide path that we want. So this should be alright. Now we can clearly see that we, when we are on the green dotted line here, we have to verify that that equals 6.5 Oscar Echo Juliet. So we have to check that this one stands at 6.5 nautical miles. And if that's correct, then we press the heading select button to go to 230, and I'll select speed of 160, set flaps 10. We call the cabin crew to take their seats for landing. And then once we have made the turn heading 264, fly basically our downwind, we set the plane up for landing and run the landing checklist. So we are now coming up on the green line. We see that this is 6.5, so heading select, reduce speed 160 knots, set flaps 10. We can arm the speed brakes, which they are. So cabin crew, take your seats for landing. Speed is dropping, but the auto throttle is now kicking in to correct that, so that's nice, as it should. Now we have to look real close to the mountain ridge here. I think we'll get a gear config horn in about any second now, and once we are about here we make the right turn heading 264. Switch the gear down immediately. There's the gear horn, as expected. So let's go 264, set gear down, flaps 15, reduce the speed 132, that was our approach speed, 127 plus 5 knots, flaps 25, flaps 30, and set flaps 40. So that's the flaps, they are now set. So let's run the landing checklist. Take your seats was announced. Engine start switches set to continuous. Runway turn off lights can come on. Speed brake armed green light. Landing gear is down locked 3 green. Altimeters 3044 set and cross checked. Missed approach altitude, I set that to 10,000 feet in Innsbruck. That should get us clear of the mountains. Flaps 40 green, landing checklist completed. So now we just have to monitor that when we hit the green line here, this one says 3.5, and if that's the case we disconnect the autopilot and we go for the manual landing. 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. We now hit the green line, 3.5. Autopilot disconnected, auto throttle disconnected, pilot has control, right turn, descending right turn for final. Now make sure you keep a rate of descent during that turn. Once we come out we want to be at approximately 2900 to 3000 feet. Let's reduce thrust because the speed is gaining. Keep that rate of descent. Keep the turn nice and steep, not too steep. We don't want passengers throwing up. There we go. Increase the speed a little bit. 3,100. 3,000 feet coming out of the turn. There's the runway down there. So keep descending. 1,000 feet per minute looks nice. Maintain the 700 feet per minute rate of descent approximately. Watch the speed. We are now slightly low, so increased thrust, a bit more power, and we're on the glide path, so down we go again. Monitor the speed 132, that's excellent. Keep that rate of descent. Speed is coming up, so let's reduce the power. Got the throttles. Flare and touchdown, reverse. Now that was that bump in the runway that I told you about. But I think we're pretty good. So let's reduce speed. 80 knots, 70 knots, manual braking. And perfectly in time for the exit, so let's roll it out. 10 knots, vacating the runway. It's not a high speed exit, so don't go in there with 30 knots. And here we are, welcome to Innsbruck. That was the Innsbruck approach with the aid of FX. I hope you liked the video. If you saw things that weren't correct whatsoever, please mention them in the comments. Tell me what was not correct, why it wasn't correct, and how to do it right the next time. I'm not a professional pilot, so I have a lot to learn myself, so any help is appreciated. Let's just look how the landing looked from the outside. And let's include that turn, I think that's quite nice. So look from the outside. Oh. Now, because of the high terrain on both sides of the airport, the wind can be quite challenging. Today the wind was calm, so that makes it easier. I suggest if you never flown this approach before, set the conditions to clear skies and no winds to practice it, and then of course it's a lot of fun to increase the difficulty by setting more and more extreme weather. Let's see how the touchdown looked. Flared a bit too early. Oh, that was quite nice actually. Flew the approach 4 times yesterday, tried to make a decent video out of it. That never worked. Fly it once today and voila, we have pretty good approach with a nice landing. Well, this is what X-Plane 11 can look like. And the Innsbrück scenery is also a demo area, so that is already quite extensive if you buy the sim out of the box. It's basically it looks kind of approaching Innsbruck from Aerosoft, and you get that with the sim. That was also the case in X-Plane 10. But nevertheless, it looks incredibly nice. It's a very nice area. One of the most fun approaches to fly in Europe. Rather challenging. But well, like I said, if you have any comments, please leave them. That's the video for today. Thank you for watching. And bye bye.